Namaskar and welcome to Diplomatic Dispatch with me, your host Vikas Swarup. The Prime Minister of Italy, Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni, paid a state visit to India on March 2 and 3, and in this week's episode, we will focus on this important visit and the partnership between India and Italy. As two ancient civilizations, India and Italy have known, interacted and traded with each other for over 2,000 years. The Venetian merchant Marco Polo visited India in the 13th century and wrote about his experiences. 50,000 Indian soldiers took part in the Italian campaign during the Second World War. Political relations between India and Italy were established in 1947, and this year marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties. The Enrica Lexi incident of 2012, involving the detention of two Italian Marines, had cast a shadow on bilateral ties, but with its successful resolution through international arbitration, India-Italy ties have made rapid progress in recent years. Prime Minister Modi and then Italian Prime Minister Conte co-chaired a virtual summit between India and Italy on November 6, 2020, which led to the adoption of a 5-year action plan that set an ambitious agenda for an enhanced partnership between the two countries. Italy is India's fourth largest trade partner in the European Union after Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands, with bilateral trade of $13.2 billion in 2021-22. Over 600 large Italian companies are active in India and 4 Italian banks. Italy ranks as the 17th largest foreign investor in India, with total investment of $3.20 billion since April 2000. There is active collaboration in the fields of green energy, defense, science and technology, culture and on multilateral issues. Italy has joined 2 of Prime Minister Modi's signature initiatives, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the International Solar Alliance. Italy also hosts an 180,000-strong Indian diaspora, the third largest in Europe after the UK and the Netherlands. Coming to the visit of Prime Minister Meloni, this was the first bilateral prime ministerial visit from Italy to India in 5 years. During her discussions with Prime Minister Modi, both leaders decided to elevate India-Italy ties to the level of a strategic partnership. A memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation was concluded, as well as a declaration of intent on migration and mobility. The two leaders called for more collaborations in fields such as technology, energy security and transition, infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, food processing, education and research and development. In particular, they agreed on the need for heightened cooperation in the key sectors of space, cyber and sea, with Italy coming on board the science, technology and academic cooperation pillar of the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative launched by Prime Minister Modi in 2019. To analyze this visit in greater detail, I am privileged to have with me 2 eminent diplomats. His Excellency Vincenzo de Luca has been Italy's ambassador to India since December 2019. A specialist in economic issues, he was previously Director General for Cultural and Economic Promotion and Innovation in Italy. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa served as the Indian ambassador to Italy, Thailand, Oman and Poland, and as Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs. A very warm welcome to both of you. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Wadhwa. What is the significance of the decision to elevate India-Italy relations to the level of a strategic partnership?
Well, thank you very much, Vikas, and thank you for having me on your show, first of all. I think by its very nature, strategic partnership means something which is special. And by special, I mean all those fields in which you have enumerated between India and Italy, they have seen a sea change over the last few years. We've seen how these relations have progressed, and you yourself traced the history of this relationship. We now have a relationship which cuts across many sectors, not just trade and investments, but also innovation, green energy and transition, science and technology, culture, people-to-people contacts. And increasingly, as we've seen during this recent visit by Prime Minister Meloni, we also have a convergence of interests as far as Italy is concerned, with India's interest in the Indo-Pacific. And going forward, I think we will have a very bright future, especially with regard to co-innovation, co-production in the defense side, and also in the industrial innovation side. And also as far as the energy transition that India now has to embark upon, Italy will be an ideal partner. We have already the traditional fields that we know are very important between the relationship between the two countries, but all these require a coming together and a confluence of ideas and new initiatives. And a strategic partnership is something which will become a force multiplier. As you know, India has a strategic partnership with very few countries. And amongst them, the latest one, for example, was the UAE. Before that, we had one with France. You've seen the relationships, how they have blossomed after the establishment of these kind of strategic partnerships, because it acts as a spurt in the overall relationship between the two countries, and both countries, both sides, will then eventually benefit from it. So this is the true meaning of the strategic partnership.
Ambassador Luca, now Prime Minister Meloni came to power in the elections held in September last year in your country as the first female and youngest Prime Minister that Italy has ever had. Why did she choose to undertake her first bilateral visit in Asia to India?
Thank you so much, Vikas. Prime Minister Meloni decided to have her first visit in Indo-Pacific in India. Was a precise political choice. Why? Because in the present political scenario and in the role that the relationship between Europe and India has now become an important partner, strategic partnership, Italy certainly is one of the leading countries in Europe, together with France and Germany, to drive this process. And that's why our Prime Minister Meloni decided to pay a visit here in India. After the invitation of Prime Minister Modi, they had a meeting in Bali recently on the occasion of G20, and soon after, Prime Minister Modi not only invited for a bilateral visit, but also to open the most prestigious forum, one of the most prestigious forum in the world, Raisina Dialogue, with the opening speech of Madam Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. So this is the importance of this visit. Without indulging into rhetorics, there is reason to consider this visit as an historical visit, as precisely said Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, because for the first time we elevate the relationship between Italy and India in a strategic partnership. Strategic partnership means many things, that we work together in the most sensitive area like defense, cyber, space, energy transition, advanced manufacturing, research and development. I would also want to add to what you said, that in the final communiqué, there is also a mention to the participation of Italy to the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative promoted by India. And I can tell, Vikas, that Italy has now joined all the multilateral initiatives promoted by India. International Solar Alliance, CDRI, and now in IORA, and now IPOI.
Ambassador Wadhwa, what according to you are the main takeaways from Prime Minister Meloni's historic visit, as Ambassador Luca just said?
So as Ambassador Luca has mentioned, I think we have 5 takeaways which are already listed out. I can enumerate them. One, of course, is to me, the most important is the elevation to the strategic partnership. But also, as Ambassador mentioned, Italy joining the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative of India, the science, technology, and the academic pillar. And that's very important because not many countries can become ideal partners in this initiative. Third, of course, is the innovation bridge, which has been assigned between India and Italy, which will lead to a further spurt in new startups and innovation. Actually, it's called the startup bridge. And thirdly, we also have an intent on migration and mobility, which has been expressed through, actually a declaration. So going forward, this will become a very important piece of paper, an agreement between the two countries. I think India is very keen to sign these kind of agreements with a number of countries around the world, especially in Europe. And finally, in peoples-to-peoples contract, we have a document also, which is a collaboration with the consulate in Calcutta, Italian consulate with the Rabindra Bharati University. So these are, of course, the listed ones. But most importantly, I also understand that the MOU on defense cooperation has been agreed upon, which will be signed at a later stage. Similarly, in terms of an MOU on industrial collaboration, which will be signed at a later stage, once again, because of scheduling problems. Some of these documents cannot be signed in such visit at short notice. But if you look at the joint communique, which Ambassador De Luca referred to, we find many other areas which just stand out. And one of them to me is in the field of industrial collaboration, where we talk about artificial intelligence cooperation, we talk about cyber security, we talk about biodiversity, we talk about sharing of technologies. And in the defense side, we have co-production and joint development. So these are very important as far as India's Atmanirbhar Bharat program is concerned. Italy can become a very comprehensive partner in all these fields going forward. It's already demonstrated its ability to do that and its intent to do that. With this, of course, paper can be signed and documents can be signed, but what is required is actual implementation. And here, Italy is in the forefront of leading from the front. In the Indo-Pacific again, and as far as EU's policy towards the Indo-Pacific is concerned, engaging with India is concerned, and helping with the India and EU free trade agreement, Italy again is a willing partner. So I think overall we've had some very key takeaways from this visit. Going forward, they'll become very important as far as Indo-Italian relations are concerned.
Ambassador Luca, now with bilateral trade touching $15 billion, which are the sectors of greatest promise for Indo-Italian commerce?
I think, Vikas, that the bilateral trade number, actually, if you consider the number until December 2022, we have a number of 15 billion euro of bilateral trade. It's important the number, but it's important about the quality of this number, because this bilateral trade means also a reorganization of the global supply chain, because we export much more machinery, advanced technology here in India, but we import from India a lot of steel, iron, aluminium. This is a fundamental component of our manufacturing. So we are becoming more and more integrated industrial system. This is the value of the numbers I mentioned before. Not only numbers, but also quality of the partnership. And I can tell you that in the framework of the visit, there were signed also very important agreements between our companies and Indian companies. For example, Anil, one of the leading utilities in the world, with a capacity of 50 gigawatt all over the world, 80% outside Italy, signed a strategic agreement with Tata Group for the digitalization of the distribution electricity grid in Delhi. And there are also further agreements that Enel is negotiated with Indian counterparts. Our defense company Elettronica signed another important agreement on electronic system for defense with the Bell in Bangalore. And 1 week before the summit, our oil and gas and hydrogen company SNAM signed an agreement with Indian Oil for a feasibility study for the transportation of hydrogen in the gas pipeline. That is the precondition of the using of green hydrogen in the electricity and the mobility system. So I mentioned this number, this quality of partnership and these agreements to give you the sense also of the implementation that is the important aspect of such an important political communique, but is already going on, this implementation. And when you mentioned the action plan 2020, we have implemented a lot of the actions convened in that digital summit.
Now in India, Italy, Startup Bridge was also launched. What will it do?
Startup bridge means we have already some Italian startup in Bangalore. Maybe you don't know, but we have some innovative Italian startup in Bangalore. But the ambition is really higher. We would like to have our companies involved in so-called open innovation. In important companies like Anil, Leonardo, Snam, ENI, and other can address the startup ecosystem in India to a search of new innovation in the strategic sector like energy transition, and advanced manufacturing, and so on. The same, also in Italy, we can have Italian startup that can provide solution for the needs of the Indian market. So this also is an ambition project. We have to work on it because still we are in an early stage of this partnership, but this I think is very promising.
Now, Ambassador Wadhwa, you mentioned that one of the important outcomes of the visit was the declaration of intent on a mobility and migration partnership agreement. Why is this framework agreement needed, and how will it boost business and people-to-people links?
So, because as I mentioned to you, India has been looking to sign migration and mobility agreements with as many countries as possible, especially with countries where we have a sizable diaspora. And the reason is quite simple, because there are problems with regard to illegal migration, first of all, as far as the host country is concerned, and that needs to be regulated. The second aspect of this is that in order to get fair wages and to be treated fairly for the work that these people do when they go abroad and work in such countries, there has to be again regulation. Also, it provides opportunities for migrants to be able to work with dignity and in a regulated environment as far as their social security issues are concerned. And as far as their work regulation is concerned, so number of hours, for instance. We have specialized skills in certain areas where there are needs of both economies, and these have to be matched. And if these are matched, then we can sign mutual recognition agreements in those particular sectors with the concerned institutions. Next step in this is normally to set up a joint working group, which then goes into all these problems and how to solve those problems. And finally, of course, is the authorities on both sides who can keep monitoring this to their satisfaction. Because if you don't have such agreements and you have such large-scale migrations, first of all, you're shutting out the avenues for migration for this population which wants to go out and work. And secondly, you're creating friction in the bilateral relationship because of illegal migration, and then also agents, for example, taking advantage of the situation and exploiting the people who are migrating. So this agreement is very crucial, and once it is signed, I think India and Italy will see much more of people-to-people exchanges, more student exchanges, and more exchanges of specialists between the two countries.
Ambassador Luca, now with legacy issues behind us and a new MOU on defense cooperation concluded, is the door now open for industries on the two sides to cooperate more strongly in this area, particularly in the fields of manufacturing, co-production, co-design, and co-innovation?
Absolutely agree. And I can tell you that in Aero India in Bangalore, we were one of the few countries from Europe who sent a deputy minister of defense from Italy with a delegation of our companies, just to send a message of our intention to be in line with Make in India and self-reliant India in order to promote investment and partnership from the industrial sector from Italy to India. Certainly Bangalore is an important area where defense industry is present. Our big companies like Leonardo, Fincantieri, others like Elettronica, and also the network of SMEs is a really important network in Italy, these companies, they have a niche competence, a niche technology advantage, and they can be very important in the building and development of new capacity in defense sector in India, because this is a strategic policy of the Indian government to increase the so-called strategic autonomy. If you want to have strategic autonomy, you need industrial capacity in your own territory. And Italy is ready to contribute to this process.
Now, Ambassador Wadhwa, India and Italy have agreed to cooperate more closely in the Indo-Pacific. What can the two countries do to advance their cooperation in the maritime space, which is so important now?
So we've seen that Italy has already joined the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, the science, technology and the academic pillar. And that's one area where Italy can make a major contribution. But of course, we also have a reference in the joint communique to maritime domain awareness. And Prime Minister Meloni specifically referred to it in the context of the EU initiative, EU Atlanta.
Yes.
And we can have a replication of that kind of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. The naval exercises, which India is conducting with a number of countries around the world, Italy can be part of those exercises as well. And fourthly, of course, there's this whole issue of ocean sustainability, blue economy, cleaning of the oceans, etc., where Italy has particular expertise. I feel that Italian companies who are working already in the Mediterranean, for instance, can replicate that experience in this working together with India in the Indo-Pacific region. India already works with a number of ASEAN countries under a bilateral development program. And here Italy can join hands with India. It's a ready-made platform. It'll add value. It'll add technology to this kind of cooperation.
Ambassador Luca, you want to come in on this?
I think that the signature of the agreement that allow Italy to join the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, we have to consider also in the in a larger geopolitical perspective, because we consider enlarged Mediterranean as part of an order with the Indo-Pacific. The two areas are interconnected, not only for the Suez Canal, but also for geopolitical reasons. And I think Italy and India can play a strategic role in both areas. Italy in the enlarged Mediterranean and certainly India in the Indo-Pacific. And as mentioned by Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, Italy is also one of the leading contributors of Atalanta exercises. We are the second country after France to contribute to that project. And we have already done some exercise with India. We will do more in the coming years. I can also tell you that we now have an official of the Italian Defense Ministry that is part of the Fusion Center in Gurgaon. This is another important contribution to the strengthening of the relationship in the maritime security and more in generally in the defense sector.
Now, the Italian Prime Minister described India and Italy as two cultural superpowers. What are your plans to boost academic, cultural and tourist exchanges between India and Italy?
India and Italy are is an evidence that we are two cultural superpowers for our tradition, for our history, but also I can tell you for our capacity to have a role, important role in the global creative industry, contemporary creative industry. I can tell you that now there are so many collaborations between Triennale di Milano and the design institution in Italy, Salone del Mobile. We hope to have also some edition of Salone del Mobile here in India, and also in the fashion sector. We have also some educational institutions like Marangoni Institute, there's a vocational center in Mumbai. Our ambition is to have even more in fashion, design, contemporary art, and also in heritage, because we signed an agreement on the occasion of the Digital Summit 2020 for a research project on promotion of heritage. A technology for the promotion of heritage. And now the project has been already approved and financed by the two sides. So in the cultural sector, we also, last month, we presented a collection of books of the Italian scholar contribution to Indology. Because the Italian tradition in Indology is one of the most important traditions in Europe and in the world. We have many scholars from Italy to US University, German University, Austrian University, UK University, that because we have a tradition, this that was started by Tucci, that was one of the pioneers in promoting Indian culture and tradition in Europe, and also many other, like Gnoli, the Roma Sapienza University, the Sanskrit Cultural Association in Italy, chaired by Professor Torella from Sapienza Roma. So, you see, we have both tradition and innovation and creativity and contemporary culture together because we are two superpowers.
I believe about 10 Italian universities, Ambassador Wadhwa, promote Indian art, culture, even teaching of Sanskrit?
Absolutely. I think Indology is very well developed in Italy. If you look at other countries in Europe, and I can only think of Eastern Europe, which is comparable. But in the western part of Europe, I think Italy is one of the pioneers in terms of Indology, in terms of interest in India, and some scholars who worked on diverse subjects over the years. Some of them are actually diversifying into contemporary India, which is a good trend, which is how it should be. And this will make sure that the universities keep up with what is happening by way of new developments between India and Italy.
Now, the Italian Prime Minister also expressed very wholehearted and strong support for India's G20 presidency. Italy itself was G20 president in 2021. Which are the G20 issues where the two countries can work together?
So, Italy has tremendous experience as far as the G20 is concerned. Its presidency of the G20 was very successful. It held the G20 in some very important cities within Italy, some of whom were heritage cities, some are culturally very well renowned cities, gave a good exposure to what Italy was to the delegates, something which India is trying to replicate as much as we can, but also in terms of the issues that face the global south today. I think it was at the G20 summit in Italy where it all began. And we saw that carrying forward into the Bali summit in Indonesia, and it's now being strengthened here in New Delhi. Hopefully it will be carried forward in Brazil as well. But what has happened is that because of the Italian initiative and because of the linkages that Italy has with the Mediterranean countries and also with Africa, there were certain issues like inclusive growth, for instance, financial inclusion in particular, and also food and energy security, sustainable development. All these are issues that confront the global south. With the war in Ukraine, we find that there's an exacerbation of these kinds of issues now. And so India is trying to actually highlight them much more because we feel that the global south is suffering as a result of this conflict. But going back to the Italian presidency, I think many of these issues were started then. They've been carried forward as a legacy. And India has worked very closely with Italy and consulted with Italy as far as these ideas are concerned.
Ambassador Luca, you want to...
Yes, I have to say that the South suffers because of the aggression of Russia to Ukraine. These are the consequences. We always say that this is not a local conflict. This is a conflict with global impact, in fact. But I agree with Anil that the legacy of our G20 president is very much in line with the Indian agenda for G20. If you look at the debt relief initiative, the health and finance track, and also the reform of the international financial institution are part of our legacy, but are also in the agenda of the Indian G20 presidency. And in fact, we will contribute to the success of the Indian president, as stated by our Prime Minister to Prime Minister Modi. We are really supportive of the efforts of a very challenging presidency for India in this G20.
Well, thank you very much, ambassadors, for enlightening our viewers on the promise and potential of the India-Italy partnership. The visit of Prime Minister Meloni has imparted a new momentum to India-Italy ties. The fact that they have been elevated to the level of a strategic partnership shows the high degree of convergence in the political, economic, and strategic interests of the two countries, which provides an enduring basis for a long-term partnership. With this, we conclude yet another edition of Diplomatic Dispatch. See you next week. Till then, take care and goodbye.